For a country with 1.4 billion people, you think China could find 11 decent soccer players. But nope, China's soccer team really sucks. They've only made it to the World Cup once, all the way back in 2002. More recently, in a World Cup qualifying match in September 2024, China lost to Japan, 0-7. But this miserable track record hasn't stopped many in China, including government officials and scholars, to proudly insist that China invented soccer. There's even a museum in Shandong province with the sole purpose of promoting that claim. Now, actually, Sepp Blatter, the ex-FIFA president, visited that museum and signed a fancy plate confirming the Birthplace Declaration. So did China actually invent soccer? Or is it just a baseless claim? Let's find out. According to historical records, such as 史记, written in the 1st century BC, a sport called 蹴鞠 appeared in the 4th century BC during the Zhou dynasty, around the area of modern-day Shandong province. 蹴 was ancient Chinese for kicking, and 鞠 meant ball. So the sport 蹴鞠 literally translates to kicking a ball. At its origin, 蹴鞠 was a military exercise for horsemen to stretch their legs after a long day of riding. There was a hoop at the center of the field, and the soldiers were divided into 2 teams. The goal was to kick the ball through the hoop. The use of hands was prohibited. During the Han Dynasty, which lasted from 206 BC to 220 AD, the popularity of 蹴鞠 spread from the army to the royal courts and upper classes. There were even 蹴鞠 playfields inside the imperial palace. The Song Dynasty, from 960 AD to 1279 AD, was a period of military weakness but social and economic prosperity. It was a time when poetry, theater, and commerce flourished. 蹴鞠 became a popular pastime for both the nobility and common people. However, it was also during this period that the competitive nature of 蹴鞠 began to fade. Instead of 2 teams competing against each other, players would form a circle and pass the ball around with their feet. The focus shifted to showcasing the fanciest tricks while making sure the ball didn't touch the ground. 蹴鞠 became more like a bigger ball version of hacky sack mixed with rhythmic gymnastics. Oh, and here's a fun twist. Prostitutes started playing 蹴鞠 in front of their parlors to attract patrons. Apparently, watching pretty women kick a ball was somehow seductive. Eventually, 蹴鞠 became synonymous with decadence and playboy lifestyle, so much so that later Chinese dynasties imposed a severe ban on the sport. The ban was so harsh that by the mid-17th century, 蹴鞠 had all but disappeared in China. The next time the Chinese went wild for a ball-kicking sport, it would be soccer in the 20th century. It's worth mentioning that while 蹴鞠 disappeared in China, it has continued to be practiced in Japan to this day. Around the 7th century AD, Japanese scholars who studied in China brought back the popular pastime of 蹴鞠. The Japanese called it kemani. It's written with the same characters as 蹴鞠and has very similar gameplay techniques. When Japan decided to westernize at the end of the 19th century, Emperor Meiji, a fan of kemani or 蹴鞠, feared that rapid modernization would cause the loss of this traditional sport. He gave an imperial grant to establish a kemani association in 1903. Thanks to him, today the sport is performed as a ritual event at the Shinto shrines and the imperial palace. Okay, so far we've established that a ball-kicking game called 蹴鞠 emerged in China about 2,000 years ago and remained popular for many centuries. It even immigrated to Japan. The question now is, whether 2G can be considered an ancestor of modern-day soccer, which was first played in England in the mid-1800s. I'll give my answer first and then explain the rationale. The answer is an unequivocal no. In the Soccer Birthplace Museum in Shandong, China, there's a picture that claims 2G traveled from China to Egypt, then to Rome, and finally to England, where it inspired the creation of soccer. It's a neat story, except that no serious historian is willing to back up this claim. There's no proof that 2G in China directly inspired the creation of modern soccer in England. When a group of English ball-kicking enthusiasts met in 1800s to standardize the rules of soccer, they most likely didn't study the ancient Chinese sport of 2G. Around the same time 2G popped up in China, the Greeks had episkiros and the Romans played harpastum. These were both board games that involved the use of feet. Later, in the Middle Ages, a bunch of board games emerged across Europe. Admittedly, unlike 2G, these European games didn't strictly limit players to using their feet. Hands were often allowed. Still, it's not too much of a stretch to imagine that at some point, a group of English athletes declared, "Hey, wouldn't it be fun to play with only our feet?" For me, this organic creation of soccer seems far more plausible than waiting for China's 2G to inspire the creation of a foot-only board game all the way in England. But let's do a purely theoretical exercise just for the sake of it. Let's say that in the 1800s, the English did indeed watch a 2G match and decided to create soccer. I would argue that even then, that still wouldn't make China the birthplace of soccer. Why? Because soccer isn't just about kicking a ball. It's got a whole system of rules and gameplay that the 2G simply doesn't have. Think of it this way. Carl Benz created the first modern automobile in 1885. Sure, his car had wheels. And yes, wheels were first used in Mesopotamia. But you wouldn't suggest that Mesopotamia invented the modern car, right? As mentioned at the beginning of the video, the Chinese soccer team has a lot of room for improvement. I agree that reminding Chinese players that their ancestors have been kicking some kind of ball for a long time may help boost their motivation. But insisting that 2G is the ancestor of modern soccer might have gone a bit too far. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you find it interesting, please click the like button and subscribe for more in the future. Thank you.